studying about Islam, we have the great inspiration here in Karachi of the Sheikh Fazlur Rahman Al-Ansari, rahimahullah, that I got to know, of course, not personally, because he's not the same age, but I heard about him first time in Trinidad 15 years ago, then in Cape Town, so in very remote places. People told me about him. And I read texts of him, and I was also introduced to his methodology to approach the Quran in a very somehow open way, meaning that we have the discipline of fiqh, or usul al-fiqh, but also we have fiqh al-Islami, which allow us to contemplate Quranic wisdom that can be applied in our life and in society. So somehow it's an inheritance. We try to take benefit of it when we study what happens in society and what's the challenge and how Islam can bring solutions. Now, talking about the society, the context, I don't speak about Pakistan because I don't know Pakistan. I would speak mostly about the Western European countries, France, Switzerland, in which you find quite many Muslims, but very few Islam, if you allow me the expression. Very few Islam because the Muslims are in a state of weakness. Most people, Muslims, practice part of Islam in a society in which it's not easy to resist as Muslims. Also, we face ideological influences from the West. Not only in Europe, but now it's become a worldwide problem. It's become globalized. That's why I think it makes sense also to speak about that here in Pakistan. Another reason to speak about this in Pakistan, like I did in Indonesia 2 months ago, and the brothers of Indonesia and the sisters of Indonesia allowed me to speak about that, which is not the case in many European universities today. You can't speak about such topics easily because it doesn't go hand in hand with the promoted ideology. And talking about neutrality in social sciences has never been true. Every knowledge is based on foundations, it's based on epistemologies, it's based on philosophical assumptions. Speaking about what I would like to address today is therefore very problematic in non-Muslim societies, but it also becomes an issue in Muslim countries, and that's why I wanted to try to explore this subject, and Dr. Umair allowed me to do so. So, shukran, jazakum khair. I will try, inshallah, to present my point in 5 different parts, quite shortly. And after the introduction, I will show you that I'm using a sociological approach. This subject has to do with philosophy, but my approach to it is sociological, meaning that I come from the field, I start with empirical evidence, not books, but what people say. I will go a bit more in detail in a few minutes, inshallah. But first, what we mean, what's the topic, what's the subject of today? The first problem, it's very tricky to name the issue we want to develop. I call it a postmodernist ideology. Some people call that woke movement, wokeism. Some people call it progressive left ideology. Others within Muslim circles call it progressive Islam. There is no consensus about the name. As many phenomena, many movements, if they want to be powerful, they try not to be classified. Because if they are not classified, they seem in evidence. These people, for instance, the activists promoting these views, they don't accept label. They say, no, we just want justice. We want human rights. We want peace. So don't call us woke. Don't call us progressive, whatever. So that's very tricky to start from something tangible. because they refuse the affiliation. But although in Europe, in the US, we can't even find a word to speak about the movement, everybody knows that there is a movement. And it's a new movement, quite recent movement, that is getting increasingly important in societies. First, the movement seems to be totally foreign to Muslim thought. So many Muslims in the US, in the UK, in France and so, they thought it doesn't have nothing to do with us, we don't care. It's like another communist story. It's like a Western problem, nothing to do with Islam. No need to talk about that. That was true for quite a long time. Later, over the last 10 years, it started to penetrate Muslim circles with the same language, same categories, same concepts. So no, nobody can deny that it's a problem concerning even Muslims. That's why, for instance, in the US, in California, Imam Zaid Shakir, he spoke about this issue during a khutbah of Friday. So he spoke about this movement that we don't know how to call it first. He said that's the left, yes? Right, left in the terms of politics. So he warned against the risk and deviance of these trendy leftist discourses. Why trendy? Because they say they fight against racism. They say they back up Muslims. They help minorities. And they struggle for gender justice, gender equality and so. That's what they say. They also speak about decoloniality, criticizing the West. Interesting. So many Muslims, when they listened to that, they felt that they may like the idea because they said, okay, that's something for us. As a Muslim minority in the West, the left politics party help us. That's what they thought at that time. Now it's becoming more controversial. Actually, when we look to that, and I will come back to this khutbah a bit later, it promotes new concepts, worldview, very new ideas that we were not used to hear about in the West. Some people, as I said, they can call it wokeism. Others say it is postmodernist discourses influenced by identity, neo-Marxism, or French critical theory. It's different influences. We can speak about that. But it's interesting to see that it comes from the West. It doesn't come from Africa, it doesn't come from Asia, it doesn't come from Muslim countries. So the critique from the West here, coming from the West side, it's something interesting that we have to keep in mind. Today, to observe this important shift we have in our societies, in Europe and the Americas, people speak about culture war. Many people say, analysts or thinkers, they say it was the time of war on terror, you know, US-based war on terror against terrorism, against Islam and so, 9/11, 20 years ago. So it's already past. No, it's more about the culture war, ideological struggle. And it's true when we look at what's happening in many settings. It's not more about identities, the way you look, your so-called ethnic group, your race. They don't care about that anymore. They care about what you think, ideologies, worldviews, and creeds. That's the tricky point. That's why in many countries now, in these Western countries, you can be Pakistani as long as you dress like Western, you think like Western, you behave like Western, and especially you accept the values that they teach you. They'll be happy about you. No problem to be Pakistani, no problem to have light brown skin, for instance. Or if you're from Nigeria or wherever, Kuwait or whatever, no problem. As long as you accept the mainstream ideology. But it's not the whole West which is like this. In the same countries, you have this cultural war opposing the right or far right versus the left or progressive left. it becomes more dichotomized recently. If we go back to the history, it was a bit more balanced. You had people in the middle. But now in many public debates, you have very few people in the middle because they expect you to take a side. So as citizens, you may either be classified as a left movement, accepting these new ideologies, or to be labeled as a right wing, like Donald Trump. It's interesting to know that, because sometimes, even if you are Muslim, you disagree with the gender identity agenda and so, they will call you Donald Trump. You are like Trump, you are like a fascist, you are lazy, you're extreme right wing. Especially if you're white. If you're white, they will tell you that. If you're white and you say two men cannot get married, they will tell you, oh, you are far right, zealot, extreme, racist. So what gender has to do with the race is not clear, but that's the way they will react to you. So there is a very important dichotomization between the right and the left. So at the first glance, you have the conservative right, which defends the traditions, continuity of the system, values of the family, nation, work, and so. Progressive left on the other side speak about social justice. And he says that they have to struggle to fight for equality, human rights. So both sides have nice talks. The problem of the right, often you will find that there is a racism within this movement against non-white, but now it's not just non-white, it's sometimes against Muslims, against different things. On the left, they claim that they are anti-racist, but at the same time they want you to follow their agenda. If you don't, they don't like you. So lately, Muslim communities become shaken and stuck between these two dichotomized sides. So they expect Muslim to take a stance. They say to Muslim, you have to choose which side you are. Are you with us or with them? The problem, as I mentioned in the introduction, Islam has its own worldview, its own values, its own principles. It's not from the right, it's not from the left. But now they expect Muslims to take a side with the left or with the right. So that's one of the difficulties we find. And classically, over the last 10, 20 years in Europe and in the US, Muslims tended in majority to tend to the left, because the left had very nice talk about minorities. They said to Muslims, we respect you, we give you freedom, we like you. The right is racist, but we are with you. That's the message of the left, and because of that, many Muslims thought that it's the correct side to be with this movement. Now, a new step arrived over the last years. It's the gradual penetration of progressive left ideological discourses into Muslim circles themselves. As I said, I don't want to speak about philosophy, I want to speak about evidence from the field. With a sociological approach, it means that to assume that there is a penetration or a higher influence of postmodernist discourse on gender and race in Muslim circles, I conducted a series of observations over the last years. Let's say over the last 6 years, I took part to different events like Muslim circles, symposiums, conferences, courses, workshops in different countries in non-Muslim majority societies. And first, I didn't go to the events to look for something special. I just went because I was interested in Islamic thought. Lately, I found out that in many of these circles, there was a new way of talking, a new ideological influence, getting bigger. Something that we never heard about 15 years ago. So here, that's an example of the places I got the evidence about which I will speak, about which I got my conclusions. But we don't have time to elaborate into too many details. I hope this paper will be published soon, so hopefully we can share it with more details and information. So in all these programs, we find that this ideology that is difficult to be named was being spread by both speakers and participants, activists. They begin to speak about these categories: gender equality, criticizing patriarchy, saying that white privilege is a problem, and so, within Muslim circles, where it was supposed to speak about Islam. So that's something that attracts the attention of the researcher, feeling that there is a shift. There is an ideological shift within some Muslim settings in the West. Before going to the details considering these examples, what is being said in these settings, it's interesting to go back to these ideologies, where they come from finally. Postmodernist ideologies on gender and race have diverse roots and influences, but it's a very contemporary phenomenon, starting after the 50s, 1950s, and getting spread out lately. Mostly it can be seen as an emanation of postmodernist thought that was a reaction against modernity and positivism. One of the claims, not talking about philosophy, but talking about the activists that promote these views, is that there is no objective truth, or there is no such thing as truth. In the activist groups, you'll hear a lot of these claims, which is, in an Islamic perspective, totally kufr. You cannot make more kufr than that, because it's like lays al-haq. Nothing is true, nothing exists. What's the science of that? It's very problematic, because if nothing is true, nothing exists by itself, everything is relative, and everything is an accident. So human life is an accident. That's why today in many Western societies, especially the younger generations, you feel that they have this problem of nihilism. There is no hope, it's not good to live, I'm a problem with the planet. They think that the planet is collapsing because of the human interference, the climate change, and they feel guilty for that. They think that their life has no value, and so some people develop very weird identities and conduct, like veganism, anti-specism, meaning that they don't make difference between the human and the dog or the mosquito. It's true. You can feel empirical evidence of that. You speak to people, you think, sorry to say, but 20 years ago in my generation, we would think that they are crazy people. Mental illness problem that you cannot speak with them because they are too far away. But now it's becoming almost mainstream. SubhanAllah. So the shift is very important. It's also linked to what we call the French theory with the Foucault, Derrida philosophers in France. Very problematic also with this idea of relativism, skepticism, nihilism, nothing exists, nothing is true, nothing has a meaning, and so. But also you have a mix of this postmodernist influence with neo-Marxism. Neo-Marxism, because Marxism was applied to the social class. Now they want to apply this to the identity groups. So they say basically there are dominant groups and dominated groups, and everything is a struggle for power. So now it became a movement, what we can call a cultural movement, that some people call that wokeism, yes? Woke movement. Others call that left progressive influence, whatever it is, because again, they don't want to be labeled. But that's something that can be observed in many ways, in society, in the movies. You have this movie I heard about in the social media, Barbie or I don't know what. This is a typical outcome of this movement, a new cultural movement, new categories, new language, new concepts, and so. So it involves this obsession of identity politics in the West related to gender and race. They like to classify people based on that. So they call people white or non-white, and they call people... It's very problematic actually, because in terms of ethnicity, they like to call the white people no white, black, and so. But in terms of gender, they say you cannot classify people in gender because it's up to you. If you feel a woman, you're a woman. If you feel a man, you're a man. Or maybe you're not a woman, not a man. You are a free gender, and so. That's the outcome of these ideologies. It also leads to activist movements such as neo-feminism, LGBT promotion of homosexual relations, and so-called anti-racism. Because we can see that the so-called anti-racism is quite racist, or very racist by itself, which is quite paradoxical. Consequence of these discourses in the West, we can feel that there's an increase of a new cultural phenomenon, as I said, wokeism, in the name of social justice. So once again, these people, they claim to do that for the good of humanity. They want to develop new values that are supposed to be universal, but at the same time, these people, they are against the West. They say they are against the West, but they are from the West. But they say we are against the old system, we want equality between races, and we want gender equality as well. The problem we have, very concretely, today there is a trend towards political correctness that prevents you to speak like I'm doing now. For instance, what I'm saying now, if I do that in my country, nobody will attack me because they are not in this game, but they will try to prevent you having a job. They will try to write an article against you in the newspapers and so, and label you as you're supposed to be a fascist or Nazi or Islamist or whatever it is. Any critical voice becomes cancelled or marginalized. It's no longer acceptable to assert that the institution of marriage involves a man and a woman. If you say that, and you work for the United Nations, in some countries you get a problem, you can be fired. They say you have to include homosexual unions. If you say you're against, even at a very personal level, you can be fired for that. Something very serious happens. Yet, many citizens are dissatisfied. Western people, most of them, or maybe, I don't know most of them or not, maybe 50% of them. They don't like that. They are not Muslims. They are maybe Christians, maybe even atheists. Sometimes they don't like that. But they're afraid of saying something because they feel that's the new hegemony. If they disagree, they got issues, so they speak about that in the coffee. But publicly, in the university and so in the media, they wouldn't speak about that, except a few who are activists and often classified as right-wing thinkers and so. So there is an increasing tension between people, increasing tension between right, which becomes extreme right, because some people are very radical against that as a result, and the left or extreme left. Why they claim to advocate for social justice by fighting racism and sexism, these discourses are paradoxically fueling an increase of racism and sexism in many countries. Is it clear? It's a very important point. Because this ideology blame people for what they are. They blame men to be men. If you're a man and you're a bit strong and so, they say, don't be like that. You have to be a bit softer. If not, they call that masculine toxicity or I don't know what. So they blame men to be men. Also, they blame the white to be white, even if they are white. Many people of these movements are white, but they don't like white people. They say you're white, you should be ashamed because, you know, your history. Slavery is because of you. That's what they say. So, because of this discourse, you have two reactions. Either you accept this and you join them and you become a left progressive activist, Or either you say, oh, they don't like us, I will fight against them, so I will become a racist, I will become anti-woman, and so and so. That's what dichotomizes society. And it's very problematic. And you see that, for instance, in the US with all the Trump followers and so. It's part of an outcome of these ideologies. Because they don't leave any possibilities for people to stay in the middle.